Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hussein Mahadi, and I'm moderator for today's session on FinTech. Today is the fifth week of the FinTech program for JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship program. And our topic for today is the role of intellectual property in FinTech. We'll be having our mentors. We have three mentors today, so we'll be having our mentors lectures on the topic. We'll also be taking presentation from our mentees and also taking the question and answers from our mentees and mentors. So quickly, I'll be making some few announcements and also within our mentors profile for us. We have three mentors today. Um, Mr. Samuel Abu, Mr. Kwe, Barino Paul, and Mr. George Onyewuchi. So quickly, I'll be making the announcements and also within their profile before we jump to the main program for today. Yeah. Okay. So about the program, Gypsy Mentorship and Internship Program is a quarterly program for students and young professionals across Africa. Mentees are afforded the opportunity to access valuable advice, training, network mentorship, internship, discussion forums, industry updates, and resource materials from experienced mentors. The program seeks to encourage continuous training, development, and evolution in Africa and around the world. You can search for our videos, our previous videos on YouTube and Facebook and other social media platforms, hashtag GypsyMIP. So the objectives of the programs is to provide easy access to quality professional guidance, training, and resource materials for students and young professionals in Africa and around the world, to facilitate dialogue and network among experienced and less experienced practitioners and stakeholders, to transform mentees into mentors and leaders for the next generation, and to facilitate further mentorship, internship, scholarship, and job placements for the mentees. These are some of the objectives of Gypsy Mentorship and Internship Program. Another announcement I'll be making is that the registration for the next quarter for Gypsy Mentorship and Internship Program is currently ongoing. We are currently taking 7 courses: blockchain, um, patent drafting, health tech and law, fintech, the energy industry, artificial intelligence and technology, and intellectual property. And lastly, the 30-minute one-on-one session is still currently ongoing. You have the 30-minute one-on-one session with your favorite mentor on the Gypsy Mentorship and Internship Program. You can send me a message, or Ms. Juliana or Mr. Joe send you the link. The link is on the screen I'm sharing, bit.ly/gypsypm. Thank you very much as you do so. So quickly, I'll be taking our mentor's profile. So our first mentor for today is Mr. Samuel Abu. Mr. Samuel Abu is um, an ambitious and astute lawyer with a detail-oriented approach to solving legal issues. He is an associate of Doyle, Ovia, and Alex Adedipe, a boutique commercial law firm where he works primarily with the TMT, technology, media, and telecommunication, and IP, intellectual property department of the firm. He is adept at providing advisory service to clients regarding their various transactions, objectives, and business undertakings. In the course of his practice, he has reviewed and advised on IP implication on creative contracts, and equally advised on IP protection strategy for startups such as trademark and copyright protection. He has been involved and practiced in a wide range of areas, including corporate and business advisory, intellectual property advisory, telecommunications, media and technology, and private equity. Is actively contributing to IP education and awareness in Nigeria through collaborative podcast sessions, social media, and speaking engagement. He is a lover of art, and in his spare time, you find him listening to music, reminiscing, and art gallery visits or writing fictions. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Samuel Abu, and thank you very much for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Joseph. But just to clarify, it's Duale Ovia and Alex Adedipe, right?
Okay,
But thanks.
sorry I didn't get that correctly.
Yeah, that's fine.
Duale,
Thanks. It's an honor
Ovia,
to be
and
here.
Alex
Alex
Adedipe.
Adedipe.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Our second mentor for today is Mr. Kwe Barino Paul. I'm sorry if I didn't get that pronunciation correctly. Kwe is the lead partner at Blocklex Consulting. He is a legal practitioner whose niche is narrowed to blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies regulation within the wider fintech ecosystem. He is the head of legals at Blockchain Nigeria User Group, BNUG, and Vefi Technology Limited. He's a board member of Blockchain Industry Corporation, coordinating committee in Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Kwe
Thank you very
Barino.
much for having me.
And lastly, our last mentor for today is Mr. George Onyeuchi. I think most of our mentees know him. He's a profound mentor in JIIPCC mentorship and internship programs. So quickly, I'll take his profile. George currently heads FinTech engagements of First Bank and its subsidiaries across Africa at its Digital Innovation Lab, setting up and driving the bank's FinTech strategy. George is a link that connects technology, business, and ecosystem partnership. He is at the intersection of products, partnership, and ecosystem building. He has led the tech solution product development for the SME banking business of a leading commercial bank and has taken numerous financial and non-financial products from idea to market and growth. He has led digital transformation in the client engagement processes for leading commercial banks, including one of the Nigerian banking industry's first end-to-end account opening for corporate accounts and SME digital lending. His team have won numerous awards for powering growth of SMEs. He also provide advisory for Africa towards developing blockchain infrastructure and building and operating system for African business on the blockchain and host knowledge sessions on blockchain applications to various industries within the African context. Thank you very much for also joining us today, Mr. George Onyewuchi. For our mentees, please join me in welcoming our mentors on the chat box by sending your excitement, emojis, and reaction. Thank you very much. So quickly, we'll be taking our mentors presentation and also lectures first. I'll be calling on the first mentor, Mr. Samuel Abu, to start his talk on the topic for today, the role of intellectual property in fintech.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Samuel,
much. Hello. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. All right. Can you hear me? Okay, that's good. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. I really appreciate that. So please just give me a few seconds while I pull out a material that I'll use to take the class today. So because I mean, it's not something I want to be so detailed with. So I'm just going to draw upon one of Wipo's material that I use. So as I project on the screen, it's just going to help us flow through the class. So just give me about 30 seconds. Let me quickly run that through.
Okay, sir. Mr. Samuel, you still on the call?
Hello.
Yes, I am.
It's not okay.
Yes, you can hear you.
Is he ready to make his
Mr.
presentation, or is it possible? Okay.
All right, so can we have someone go first? Just trying to get my file ready, right?
Okay,
So I just
I
get
think
it.
we should,
All right.
I think,
I'd like to do that.
Mr.
All right.
Quick
So, all right. Thank you very much. The video isn't necessary, right?
Sir?
The video isn't necessary, right?
It's necessary.
Okay. Let me just show my face briefly. So,
Okay.
hello everyone. So I'll go back to audio mode. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
So
much.
today, yeah, thank you. So we are basically, I was asked to speak on the role of intellectual property in FinTech. Okay, so I'm presenting with a slide, even if I can't share the screen right now. So I'll probably share the slide later with the rest of the, is it team or class? Okay, so we are speaking today on the role of intellectual property in FinTech. And I think we should draw it down to Nigeria. Before we talk about intellectual property right, we have to understand, we have to have a basic understanding of what it's all about. And basically, intellectual property rights are those rights over creation of the mind or the intellect manifested in tangible or intangible forms, such as inventions, artistic and literary works, signs, symbols, or alphanumeric characters used in commerce. So we need to understand something here when it has to do with intellectual property. One is that it is a creation of the mind, and two is that it has to be manifested in a way. It's not just like, let's say you think about something, okay, I want to create this, I want to do something that can fly over the air, okay, something that can make humans fly with wings. I want to do that, and then you just want to like go ahead to protect that as an intellectual property. No, it isn't. It can't be protected as intellectual property until it is made manifest in a, it could be a tangible form, like something that can be held, something that can be held and all of that, mostly work of arts and all of that, like sculptures and some other works of inventions, let's say machines and all of that, can fall within the category of tangible. Then there are those that are intangible. For instance, let's say music, you can only hear music, but you can't touch it. There are also those that are visual, which are like this, what's presented on the screen. Like now, you can actually see display on the screen, but you can't actually touch or feel it. So basically, there are different categories of intellectual property. We have copyright. We have a copyright, and of course, copyright refers to basically the class of intellectual property rights vested by laws in authors and creators of literary, artistic, and musical works. Under the Copyright Act, which governs copyright within the Nigerian jurisdiction, copyrights are basically categorized in accordingly, literary works, musical works, artistic works, cinematography works, sound recordings. So after that, we have the trademark. Of course, trademarks are signs, symbols, or characters used to distinguish brands, products, or services from similar ones within a commercial setting. For instance, let's say you are into selling bread. Bread is something that we have so many bakeries around, so many brands. So to distinguish yourself from other brands, it's very important that you trademark your bread, to make it stand unique. Or let's say, for instance, okay, let me not use bread, since we are actually dealing with people that are not just within the tech space, but within the fintech space. When you talk about that, there are different financial products you can actually provide, like payment solutions, and there are a lot of payment solutions out there. There are a lot of deposits and withdrawal services and other related services. And then you could actually trademark yours to make your stand out. In the course of this whole cashless withdrawal limits and all of that, people have been talking about how each bank's how the application, like the app of each bank, mobile transfer app of each bank has been working. And they mention each of the bank's name, and then people have to, like, okay, if this other one is working and I bank with this bank that is working, I have to go to it. But if these things are not trademarks, if they don't have a name that distinguishes them, it will be difficult to say which of the app or which of the service provider is doing very well in this regard. And then we have a patent. Patents are rights that are granted to inventors or those that discover one thing or the other. Let's say you invent something special. Let's say, okay, payment solution is something general, but then you invent something that makes payment solution stands out. You understand? When you invent this particular thing, you could actually apply to the registry, the relevant registry, which is the trademark, patent, and design registry. When it has to do with Nigeria, you can apply to them to, like, okay, for the next, I want to be the sole producer, like I want to have the sole right of producing this particular invention that I've made. And usually that is usually granted for like a period of 20 years. 20 years, you have the monopoly of that particular invention or discovery. Also, we have what we call the trade secret. We have trade secret, we have industrial designs and all of that. When it comes to trade secret, it has to do with your business secret. There are things that make businesses stand out. And then these things, like, let's say, I hope I've not used up my time yet. So let's say hello?
Yes, we can hear you. You still have time, sir.
Oh, okay, I still have time, all right. So let's say you are providing a payment solution, and then you are able to discover something that, there is a way you actually provide your payment solution, and there are ways to go about it. These things actually they are usually reflected in what we call the business plan. And when these things are reflected in business plan, what you should do when it also has to do with the cooking industry and all of that too. It also applies. Let's say there is a way you go to Kilimanjaro, for instance, it tastes their food, it tastes differently. You go to Mr. Biggs, it tastes differently. And then you say you like that of Kilimanjaro, you understand? And then you keep going to Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro will not want to, like, make its recipe known to the public, because that's their own trade secret. That's what makes them stand out. That's what makes them have a competitive edge over others within the industry. So, okay, now, so basically applying these things to these categories of intellectual property rights I've mentioned, applying them to the fintech industry. Of course, as a company, when you are first incorporated, when you want to start particularly a fintech company, the first thing you do is actually to incorporate, to first of all get your name, the name for the business. By the time you must have, placed your idea, you've put your idea into writing, possibly the business plan is in a sketch and all of that, you go ahead to incorporate it with the Corporate Affairs Commission. When you incorporate it with the Corporate Affairs Commission, that's one form of protection. You're actually protecting your name. It's almost like an intellectual property right protection anyway. But you might want to trademark it. You might want to trademark the entire brand. However, you could decide to say, okay, I don't want to trademark the entire brand. I want to trademark specific products. Let's say you provide payment solution, you provide some other forms of solutions that within the fintech space and all of that. And then you have apps that actually attend to each of these. Let's say you don't incorporate all the services into a particular application, you actually just make it available on different applications. So you could trademark each of your services. When it has to do with trademark, trademarks are actually registered according to categories, and registration of trademarks is actually done in categories, which is within what we call, Nigeria adopts what we call the NICE classification for trademarks. I think there are about 45 or so in the categories. There are those for product, there are those for services, and so on and so forth, those for goods as well. So when you have to ensure that while registering your trademark, you have to ensure that you register it within the correct category, or it reflects across the different categories. Let's say, for instance, you provide financial services. You have to register that particular product or service within the financial category. If you are interested in protecting it beyond the financial category, let's say other kind of categories that might be available, and you are interested, let's say adequate protection, you might want to protect it across each of those categories. But in each of the category you want to protect them, you have to register them uniquely. You have to register the product uniquely in those categories, in each of those categories. And after you've registered them, you have the right to the protection of that trademark for the first 7 years, renewable for additional 14 years. Like subsequently, you can always renew it for subsequent 14 years and so on and so forth. That's for trademarks. Then furthermore, along the line, definitely you would have drawn your business plan, and then you want to pitch to investors. You want to raise funds, you want to pitch to investors, and some other persons who might be, let's say, you want to invite people to partner with you and all of that. It's very important that at that point, you have your trade secret documented in the form of a business plan or any other form of documentation. It is important that before you actually go ahead to disclose it or to share that document with a third party, it is important that what we call the non-disclosure agreement is signed between the parties to ensure that the party does not use it or disclose it to a third party. So after then, as a business, you might want to, like, of course, you are growing and all of that. I think we've talked about this in, okay, yes, you have workers, of course, you have workers as a fintech company, you have those that will be creating, let's say, you employ programmers, you employ developers, you employ designers. These people will be creating works for you. They'll be creating applications, they'll be running programs and all of that. You can actually exercise copyright, right of copyright over those programs, over those works being created by either your employee or those that you've outsourced to do it. Let's say, for instance, maybe you don't want to employ a tech person permanently, you don't have what it takes to maintain someone that is a tech person and all of that. You have to specifically state it in the agreement, particularly if the person is an employee. It has to be clearly stated in the letter of employment or in the employment contract, basically the employment contract, it has to be clearly stated that the work of the employee will belong to the company, or else that work will originally, like the copyright, will actually be vested in the employee if the employment agreement doesn't specifically state it that the copyright over that particular creation will rest in the company. I think I've been able to cover quite a bit of that. I've spoken about trademarks. I've spoken about copyright. I've spoken about trade secret, right? Yes, I've spoken about trade secret. And is there any area I've not touched? So there are relevant laws actually governing these various categories. Like, for instance, of course, the trademark and patent and designs, actually they are registered at the trademark, patent, and design registry. Then the copyrights are registered within are registered at the Nigerian Copyright Commission. So I think I'll draw the curtain for my presentation to close at this point and then be open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwe. That was a very educative presentation. We learned a lot about IP when we are relating it to FinTech. So I'll be calling on
Hello?
I guess Mr. Hussein might be having a slight network issue. Mr. Hussein, are you there? Let's see. But we are supposed to take the second presentation from our second mentor today. Either of the mentors who is available can actually proceed. Mr. George, you can also proceed if you're ready. Yeah. So I'm still trying to see if I can get Hussein, but any of the mentors who's ready can actually take the floor.
Okay.
Okay, is it back? All right.
Mr. George is fine. I defer to your.
Hi guys. Good. Is evening now, right? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. And yeah, nice to be here again. For those I'm George Yuchi, for anyone that doesn't know me by now here. And good presentation and education from my good friend Barino. Barino, well done. Nice to meet here again. Nice to meet us here.
Yes, so
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. George. I was surprised seeing you here. It's
Yeah.
nice to meet. It's a small world.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It is, yeah. So I think we're looking at intellectual property today. Barina has done a lot of work to talk about the legal angle of intellectual property. Talk about different forms of IP, intellectual property. Talking about designs. I think you mentioned business models. The branding of the FinTech or a company. Very correct. I think there are just two things I would add to that list, which I'm not 100% sure the probably captured, which is particularly on the FinTech side, things around prototypes and things around source codes. Source codes are a major intellectual property element for any FinTech, especially if you are providing any form of software as a service. source codes are basically those codes or those things that actually make the service or the program work. So source codes, if you're fintech providing any form of software as a service, one of your key and most important intellectual property is actually your source codes. So that is definitely one that every fintech guides with, guides with everything that they have. And a lot of times when people, it's one of the major things people attack fintech sites for when hackers or spammers are trying to competitors, or even your staff, when they are leaving, some of them go with your source codes, and when they take your source codes, basically they can replicate your company in a blink of an eye. So source codes is a very critical part of IP for fintechs. But now here is an interesting conversation. The value of fintech versus the value of an IP. Is the value of your intellectual property actually synonymous with the value of a fintech? I talked about source code not long around and how critical source codes are as an intellectual property for fintechs, right? But there are fintechs that, rather than guide the source code with all they have, they actually do what we call open source. They actually give out the source codes. They make it free for you to actually see their source codes and use the source codes if you want to, to replicate whatever you want to replicate or improve on that source code, modify it in any way that you deem fit. Now, the question is, does it make those fintechs less valuable because their most important intellectual IP is out there in the public, right? So it now goes to another leg whereby what makes you as a fintech, the things you protect, goes beyond your intellectual property. The value of fintech, while your intellectual property is a critical part of it, right? Some other things that people don't count as intellectual property are actually very critical things or properties that fintechs, guide with everything that they have. The network effect that you build with your customer base. So if you have access to my designs, you have access to my source code, you can recreate my product, for example. Can you recreate my customers? So if somebody, for example, has access to all the source codes of Facebook, does it mean if you recreate a platform just exactly the same way Facebook is tomorrow, does it mean that 2 billion people will come on that platform because you got Facebook source code and you have recreated a Facebook? Elon Musk has been talking about taking open sourcing Twitter, which means actually exposing the source codes of Twitter. So if Elon Musk does that maybe by next month, anybody can take the codes of Twitter and recreate Twitter. But the question is, if you recreate Twitter tomorrow, which so many people have tried to do, does it mean that 1 billion users are going to come on that application because you have recreated Twitter? So for fintechs particularly, the fact that source codes are that critical, for any fintech, and it's part of what makes the value of that fintech, but it's not the only property that you guide. The other property might not be as intellectual as the other ones that I've talked about are mostly defined as the patents, the source codes, and the likes of them. The other ones might not be as intellectual. The guiding of your business model around your customers, right? How you acquire customers. The network effect that you're created by the sheer volume of customers that you have. can you replicate them even if somebody steals your source code? Can they replicate that, right? So it's always very critical that while IP is a very critical conversation in fintech, there are other properties that the fintech also guide closely that are not conventionally captured as IP, right? So that's why while we're talking about source codes, I mean, you can't talk about fintechs without talking about their source code, especially for guys that are providing softwares as a service. That is the lifeblood of that fintech. But it is not the only property that you must protect, right? Your business model, as casual as it sounds, right, is also something that some of these things you actually can't, quote unquote, hide them. You can't protect them. Your business model, for example, more than 95% of the time, you can easily know the business model and if fintech is running. There are few cases where you wouldn't know the business model of your competitor, or you don't know the business model people are doing, running, right? But the way you build your organization might not make it easy for you to just incorporate their model just because you know their business model. There might be other things that they've set up or that you might need to have to set up before being able to create that business model. So it's not like you don't know the business model, right? But you just can't take that business model and put it inside your place and start running with it. So fintech and every other, and most of all these other businesses, manufacturing, I mean, Barry was talking about recipe for guys in the food business or in the restaurant business. What the things they guide, or the intellectual property they guide, are slightly different, right? So just like how the recipe of a restaurant or a food business is the same, that recipe represents the source code for a fintech, right? Because it is actually what creates the food that the guys are cooking, or the meal or the flavor, right? That is actually being made. So how you see that recipe book for the guy is also, how you see that source code. But remember that because this guy has cooked a good food, right, doesn't necessarily mean the restaurant will have biggest of customers. There are a lot of restaurants today that probably don't, or there's a lot of things we buy that probably are not like the sweetest, but simply because of packaging, they are selling more than the one that you say is sweeter. You will see two products. One is poorly packaged. The other one is so beautifully packaged, but it doesn't taste as good as the other guy. It doesn't taste as good as the other guy. But you see that one has the one that is sweeter, but is not well packaged. It's not selling as much as the one that is so beautifully packaged, but is not actually as sweet. So it goes to tell you that source, even for non-tech companies, that thing that is like the core, quote unquote, source code, the core secret, the core intellectual things, are not just what make up, the success of those companies. The things that are also well known by the rest of the world, like the packaging, you can see the packaging is fine. If you want to replicate that packaging, you can go and replicate it for this other spice, right? But it somehow you don't get to replicate it, and the spice is selling off the shelf more just because somebody sees it and it catches their eye and they buy it, even when they've never tested it. So where I'm going to is that intellectual property for a fintech, just like for other companies, it's important, right? Things like source code, things like designs, things like business models. There are some that you can protect. There are some you can't protect. You can't really protect your business model. You can't even copyright a business model, except that business model is tied into some technology advancement. But just because you say you have a way of doing things, it doesn't mean somebody cannot copy it. So it's an intellectual property, but you can't really protect it. But for the things that you can protect, things that you can copyright, things that you can patent, the things you can hide from people like source codes, they are critical part of what makes a fintech. but not the only properties that you need to protect, right? So it is very important to not just get stuck at this is my intellectual property at FinTech and then just go to sleep. Now, lastly, I think that I always like to talk about the individual. You as an IP, you as an intellectual property, what is your IP? So everybody will definitely not build a FinTech. Everybody will might not even definitely work in the FinTech. But as an individual, as you and you enterprises, what is your IP? What is your intellectual property that you have that people want to seek? It is very important that we always consider that, right? The reason why I know Barry, for example, and the reason why you probably have brought him here is because he has a form of intellectual property around law that you want to tap into, right? And so if he doesn't have that intellectual property, you wouldn't bring him here. So what is that area that you want to be a trusted authority so that it will be an IP for you? So that even though people cannot replicate your brain, rather they will want to get you involved into a process or get you involved into an organization to come and replicate it because they can't steal it from you, right? So while it is important to understand the intellectual property for fintechs, also create your intellectual property as an individual. And creating your intellectual property as an individual is that you're not going to patent your head, or if you don't have engineering things to patent, you don't have any patent to do, but we all have things that we can copyright within our brains so that when we give it out, people know that when it comes to this intellectual area or when it comes to this particular area, this person is a very trusted authority and we want to tap in that is IP. So create an IP for yourself. If it's not something that is so novel that you can secure by copyright, you can secure by patent, your name becomes the IP. People would know that Obo Joseph, for example, right, is a very strong mind when it comes to this. Right? People will know that JIIPCC is a very strong organization when it comes to mentorship of legal minds. That is an intellectual property that you might not necessarily protect. Rather, but people know that property, and because they want to tap into that property, they join the JIIPCC program, right? So you want to take a service from a fintech because their intellectual property is giving you an outcome, right? It's solving a problem for you. So for that fintech, that intellectual property is key to them. But for you as an individual, or you as a customer of that fintech, you're getting a service. So in the same way we're looking at intellectual properties for fintech, I don't always forget to tell people to always remember to take care of themselves or look out for themselves and create your own intellectual property so that tomorrow, let someone know that because they cannot steal that intellectual property from you, they have to call you, either by a form of hiring, either by a form of consulting with you, either by a form of inviting you to talk about it. In whatever way, you're going to be involved because of that intellectual property. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. George. It's always very educative listening to you, and we would always want to continue listening to you, if not for the time factor or constraints that we look into. We also have to hear from other mentors and also take our question and answers. So we'll be coming back for the question and answer, also comments on the mentee's presentation. I think we should take our last mentor, Mr. Samuel.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Barry, Mr. Barry, and Mr. George, for such an insightful lesson on the impact of IP in fintech. It's really amazing. And thank you, JIIPCC, for having me here. When you read through their profile, I was like, you guys brought me amongst men. These guys have gone far ahead, right? And but the beauty about IP, or the beauty of IP, is that it just helps you, to connect with people in different spheres and then in similar, what's it called now, field as you are. As you heard from them, they were like, we're surprised to see each other here. I'm not surprised, because I mean, when both of you have such experience in IP, we should expect to see you guys at every IP conversation. So once again, thank you so much, Mr. Barrida and Mr. George. So to be fair, yes. Yeah, thank you, sir. So yeah, they've given quite the insight. You're welcome, sir. They've given quite the insight on the roles of IP and tech. And so I don't want to beat too much on what they've discussed already, right? So I think what I would just focus on is the angle of trademark. So at DOA law, right, what some of the services that we offer to FinTech guys, other tech guys, guys in logistics space, in the edutech, insurance tech, and all of those things, right? And when you're building a product, tech guys are very, very, very enthusiastic. They are so enthusiastic. For them, it's like, get this product out now. But you're thinking, right? Because one of the first things that you have, for example, is, let's say, a founders agreement. And these guys have to create a company. They have to name a company. So the question you're asking yourself is, once you incorporate this company, you have a product in mind, right? Before you start building your product, or in the process of building your product, you want to make sure that the name you give your product is distinct from the market. So what you then advise them is that, you know what, pick a name. So if you're offering a services in this class now, talking about FinTech, one of the interesting things about trademark is that you do not trademark generic names. So people will bring up product like something, but they might bring out payments. You can't trademark the word payments, right? Because they stand alone. But you can do something like bucket payments, right? Bucket is far from payments. You can bring something like artificial payments. You can bring something like RTP. You get, these things are distinct names that are not generic, but they fit into the structure of your trademark, right? And then you advise your clients to go on with that. So the beautiful thing about the role of IP and FinTech is that as a lawyer, you have to understand the fundamentals of these laws, right? To be able to advise your clients. So from the trademark angle, like Mr. Barina has explained, this is what separates your company's services from other people. He has mentioned, which I actually quite agree with, most of the business models for all FinTechs are always the same. And in fact, when FinTechs founders, right, they want to go to investors board and they'll seek for money and funds, most often than not, investors will not sign NDAs because they will tell you that the idea you're pitching to us, we've seen it somewhere before, right? But it's not a brainer. It's no brainer. I mean, you could send the NDA, you can decide to sign, they can decide not to sign, or both of you could have a mutual NDA, right? However, also like what Mr. George has said, the value of your FinTech is beyond the value of your IP. It's about your IP and how you streamline it with the market and you're able to make money from it. So let me just get this all worked up. So the first thing is trademark. Trademark the name of the product, very key. Trademark the name of the company, trademark the name of every feature in that product. I'll give you an example. So I don't know if any of you probably know about Abeg, right? It's it used to be Abeg, I think it's by Piggyverse, right? When they switched to Pocket App, they had to change to Pocket App. Before they could make that change, they had to register the trademark for Pocket App, right? Then if you go on Pocket App, you have something like Pocket App Business, Pocket Shop, all those things, right? All those names, you want to trademark it. So if you have someone that is building a FinTech, right, you want to ensure that every of the features, right, the names of those features are being protected by trademark, right? And because the way trademark is, letter of acceptance, it's all of it. It's basically a long process, that one. I don't want to bore you guys through it. But one of the fundamental things, right, is you working with having those names registered and protected. Now, the second thing is going to be patent. The beauty about patent is patent protects your invention. But however, in Nigeria, by common practice, you can't patent an application. If you remember what Mr. George said about open source, right? Application software are pretty much everywhere. Someone can just build up an application. It's not so what's it called now, distinct, right? But however, there's something we call utility of patent, which speaks to functionality. right? So if you have an app like Flutterwave and you have an app like Piggyvest, right? They both may not enjoy patents, although they can, with respect to specific features that they provide. So one of the most interesting analogy I love to use to explain the concept of patent is Spotify and music, Apple Music, right? When you use Spotify, for example, there are certain features, right, that Spotify has that Apple Music does not have. You click on Apple Music, you have something called lossless music. It changes the quality of the audio you listen to. But Apple Music doesn't really shuffle music for you like that. But when you click on Spotify, there's an icon that allows you to shuffle music and it brings that music to your taste. Secondly, Spotify also allows you to shift the applications on which, the devices on which you listen to your music. So if I'm listening to music on the same Wi-Fi channels on my Spotify, on my laptop, right? And I move from here to my mobile phone, as long as my mobile phone is on the same channel, or at that point in time, my mobile phone is connected to the internet, I could always switch whichever place I'm listening to, right? That's such a beautiful feature, right? But on Apple Music, you hardly find that. Same thing too with fintechs. There are certain features that they give you. For example, some fintechs could give you what we call virtual account services, while some others will not. They could decide to patent it. They could decide to patent the structure in which they do those things, right? But more often than not, in Nigeria, is the utility of patent that works. Because the utility of patent basically says that, you know what, you don't have to fulfill all the stringent requirements of a patent, right? Because really, for patent, it has to be inventive, not necessarily new, but it has to be inventive, right? It has to solve a problem. It's something that you can replicate across board. But when you think about it, you have so many fintech apps, like there are so many. In fact, everybody is, what's it called? Everybody is addressing the unbanked. You get on the call with them, you say, they'll tell you they're building an infrastructure. They love that word a lot, tech voice, infrastructure to the unbanked, to provide financial services and all of those things, right? But I mean, the best thing you have, at least in Nigeria, is that utility of patent. So that way you can always advise your clients that, you know what, instead of spending so much money trying to get patent when your, what's it called now? Your optimum, there's something they call this thing in business, the particular service that you offer, the specific service that makes your business stand out is not so much, right? They want to now build your business all upon it, right? So you can just go for utility of patent. That way you can enjoy a protection over your application, your application and all of those things. Then thirdly, right, is going to be can I share my screen? Is it possible?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So and now instead of going to walk you guys through something I got from JIIPCC, right? All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, good. So this is a material I got from JIIPCC, right? That's talking about how you can protect, talking about IP with respect to application models and all of those things, right? And you'll see they've explained about, you know, patents, trademark, industrial designs. This is very key. We're going to come back to this. And then we have copyright. For all other things, I don't think that applies to us yet, right? But for trademark, so now for copyright, yeah, we understand that copyright is for written, it's for what's it called now, literary works. And God bless you, Mr. George, for something you mentioned. He said source code. And yes, so everything the software guys build, the programmers build is the source code. In fact, if you go on Chrome, and I think there's a control thing that you press, or check the option on your Chrome, you see the source code of the website you're visiting, right? But the beautiful thing is that for every product or software that you have, there's always a base source code. And that base source code is basically the foundation of that product. So if you have a product like Payday, there's a base source code, right? Everything is built on that. The branding, the UIs, the UX. So if I say UI, UX, I'm talking about the user experience and the user interface. The user interface, for example, if you look at your Zoom board right now, this is the user interface. You can see where the audio is, the video is. Basically, that's your UI. Then the UX is the experience you have from it, right? So that's why every app has a different color stream. And again, the example I also use is still Spotify and Apple Music. the UI for Spotify is always green. You see a lot of greens everywhere. You wonder if it's a Nigerian company. Although it would be great if it was, but then you look at Apple Music, you see a lot of reds. You have reds and black over here and over there. Yeah. So the same thing for any fintech app you look at. If you look at Bamboo, it's green. If you look at Rice, I think Rice is a bit like blue or something lightish. Lemon is a bit of lemon green. Piggy is blue. Flutterwave is yellow. I mean, these things you can just see them there, right? But they're all built on a source code. And the beautiful thing is that in Nigeria now, you can actually register. So at least in practice, what this will advise some of our clients, right? Instead of what's it called now, patenting and doing, just bring your source code in its raw form, and then we register it through the what's it called now, NCC. Yeah, and there's a registration portal that you have for copyright. So right now, we understand that copyright in yours and you want it is fixed, right? And upon creation. And also, I think one of the beautiful things that what Nigeria has been able to do, at least following what WIPO once tried to do with WIPO Proof. So you can now upload your source code, and then when it's on the system, it shows or it serves as a timestamp as to when that product was created, right? So right now in Nigeria, you can actually do those things. You can register your source code. I think so far I've been engaged in 2, right? Source code one was for employment management, and the other one is for what's it called? It was for device management or device searching, something like that, right? But these are functional applications, right? So ideally, if you have a client that is in that space, you want to tell them to get you the functional source codes in whatever form it is. The restriction is about 20 megabytes. Source codes are not always that much. It's just basically written codes, right? And you can just compress them and upload them, and you have that saved on the system for them. Which other thing will I say? I think the other thing I'll mention now is licenses. So I know we've discussed about copyright. For patents, I already explained that patents can be quite difficult because ideally for applications, not so much. I mean, for Nigeria now, for most guys in Nigeria, especially in the fintech space, you are not patenting so much because you're basically providing similar services, right? But the utility of patent is better. So that one allows you to protect your application the way it looks. Yeah. Trademark, I know I've discussed about this. I think right now, or which is even much more interesting, is that the BFA, the Business Facilitation Act, has now expanded the meaning of what you call a mark. So now a mark now includes services, right? So I know we understand that for trademark, you have a class 1 to 45, you have the goods and you have the services. And for this as well, yes. So in practice, we also always advise clients to, trademark across at least 2. So if you're a fintech company, you're in the financial services, right? And then you're also providing technology services, right? So for financial services, we take it to class 36, I think 36, right? Then for technology, we take it to class 42. So ideally, you want to make sure that your client is protected on all grounds. You don't want this abuse kind of experience, right? So you know that you are a tech company, you're operating in this space. So we just advise you, protect yourself as a tech company, very good, right? But at the same time, you also want to streamline yourself to the services that you're offering, right? So you also want to protect yourself in that service. So that means if you are a health tech, or for example, if you provide food, right, through technology, something like Jumia Food or something, right? If you want to trademark that word Jumia Food, you are trademarking it as a tech company, and they are trademarking it under food, right, to be provided. Exactly. I hope that is clear. And the last one, which I'm going to just talk about, is licenses. Licenses, very key. So the beautiful thing about licenses is that the worth of your IP, right, is also determining, it lies on how well you can exploit it. Yeah, so even in your NDAs, in your normal service agreements that you have with other third parties, in your partnership agreements you have with other third parties, you always want to make sure that you guide your IP jealously. We have instances where there will be product partnership between two entities. So for example, you're on a platform I think if you use Piggyvest a lot, you can see that Piggyvest has found a way to integrate with YouTube, right? And I'm sure in that agreement, it's going to be clearly stated that, you know what, Piggyvest cannot, what's it called now, exploit the trademark or IP of YouTube as its own, right? Except for the instances of the services, except for the instances of the agreement they've entered into. So you also have that because your clients or your tech guys or your fintech guys want to collaborate with someone in another space, right? You want to ensure that you basically guard the IP. So one of the clauses always use is that, you know what, for every IP that has been developed prior to this agreement or prior to this partnership, right, it's going to be to the developer of that IP. So if myself and Mr. George, let's say we are two fintechs separately, I have a product A, right? I have IP A, your feature A, and Mr. George has feature B. Before we enter into the agreement, you know that it's no, you know what, my feature A belongs to me, my feature B belongs to your feature B belongs to you. But for the purposes of the agreement to enter into, we can leverage on both features, right? Once that agreement is terminated, everybody takes back their IP. Then the question then is, what now happens to the IP that is developed in the course of the business, right? So for that one, of course, you want to then explore past mediation and arbitration should not sit out, you know what, how many percent did I put into developing this product, how many percent did George put into developing that product, and all of those things. Yes, and so for licenses, as I didn't finish up with that, so for licenses, you have instances wherein people actually build source codes and they set it up or they license it to you to use, right? So you also make sure that you protect that license for a duration of time, and you also protect it for a jurisdiction as well, right? So you want to ensure yourself, you want to tell yourself that, you know what, if I'm going to this agreement with this party, or we are licensing you to use this source code or this software, right? You will not use it beyond Nigeria, or you will not use it, you will not use it beyond Nigeria or beyond West Africa, and also you will not use it beyond the services contemplated in this agreement, and also you will not use it for more than a period of so number of years time, right? And then yes, I think so far. Let me check my notes quickly. I think so far that's basically that's it. And lastly, industrial designs. Interestingly, we know industrial design speaks to, most times it starts with your trademark, right? And it also speaks to the composition of your lines, the objects, the colors, variation patterns of use of your product. So you have ID design, ID protection for, let's say, Kampala and other things. Same way it is for products, for what's it called, for fintechs, right? So this now takes us back to UI. Just as you can protect your source codes under patent or copyright, right? You can then protect your UIs under user interface. In fact, I know WIPO actually recognizes it as one of the best ways, to protect your GUIs, graphic design interface. They actually fall under the industrial designs, because really, for you to get the best user experience for any product, it's always tied to the user interface for each product. So of course, I don't want to go back to the old Spotify, Apple, what's it called now, explanation. Other fintechs in Nigeria, you can always tell, because the colors, the UIs, the experience, the UX are basically part of the general feel of that product. So you don't have to be able to touch it. As far as you can see, right? As far as you can see those colors, you can see those features, you can see those lines, those patterns, right? It's basically your industrial design that covers that. But the interesting thing about industrial design is, before you push it out to the public, you also have registered it. And most times, most fintech guys don't do that, right? And I don't blame them, because the main thing is the source code and your trademark, right? Because if you lose those two things, it's going to be difficult. You have to start going to court. You have to start, telling or trying to raise opposition, right? When that's someone bringing similar name like that of yours into the public, right? And I think there's one final thing I would say, is that we also have what we call trade secret. Let me just see if I can pull that up for you guys here. We have what we call trade secret as well. And that also pretty much falls into the category of what Mr. George mentioned, right? On how you protect your work before it comes into the public, and how you protect with NDAs and all of those things, right? So your business model is great, is good, but the thing that really helps you scale, right, is the value of your patent, the value of your mechanism, your structure, right, for that product. Everybody has similar business model. They will tell you they will integrate with this, will integrate with that person, enter into MSC agreements. These are so I'm speaking from an angle of payment service, for example. They will enter into agreements with MasterCard, with other merchants, and all of those things, and they will tell you their quality certain rates and charges. Yeah, these are all business models, right? But the structure you have in place that makes yours worth it is something you can actually protect. You can actually pretend. So I would argue that the strongest thing you have, apart from your business model, right, is the functionality of your patent. Utility patents, that's fine. But patents also goes beyond just invention of mechanical stuff. It also covers structure. So it's possible for you to actually patent a structure of your business, right? But the same way too, you can also have that as a business secret that you don't want to share with anybody, and which I think is still one of the best approach, right? So if you have that as a business secret, it's no longer under patent. It's not a business. It's not a trade secret. Whereas if it's not a trade secret, it most times falls back on that patent. And so without anything, there's always a lot to see anyway, but I don't want to make it too complicated, right? But I think that sort of brings me to the end of this conversation, right? So I'll try to see if I can get this across to you guys, right? So I mean, why pretty much just explained everything with respect to how your application should work and how you can protect your application. So if you can get those things right, then I mean, whatever is left with respect to the services stays with the services, right? So yeah, I hope that pretty much answers all of the questions. Right. Yes, that's it for me.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Samuel Abu, for that in-depth explanation of the topic for today. We are all listening attentively and learning and jotting down things from everything you say. And quickly, I think you can also share your presentation through the chat box. You will see a plus button there where you can share photo or file. Thank you very much. And also, that also goes to Mr. Barino. You can also share your slides with us. Thank you very much as you do so. Quickly, because of the time constraints, we'll be calling on our mentees to make their presentation. We have two groups, so we'll call on group one to make their presentation first and group two also afterwards. So group one, please, if you are ready, you can start now.
Hello, good evening. I would like to share my screen, but I can't because there's someone else sharing.
I'm sorry, you can share the screen now. I already stopped.
All right, thank you. A moment. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Wanguma. I'm representing Group 1. But first, I want to thank our mentors for their lectures and their time. It's deeply appreciated. My topic or our topic for today is the role of intellectual property in FinTech. So we'll just get right to it. I mean, we'll start by defining what intellectual property is for us to get an idea of what we're speaking to. It refers to creations, really, of the mind that can either be literally artistic, scientific, or broadcast, really inventions in all fields of human endeavor. And intellectual property rights will be the rights that are granted to individuals that create these products, the rights over their creations. And in most cases, they grant the creator an exclusive right to the use of his or creation. I mean, a typical example would be if I write a book, that's my intellectual property. And there's definitely a category that intellectual property falls under. In Nigeria, the different laws that protect intellectual property, we have the Copyright Act, the Trademarks Act, the Patents and Designs Act, the Merchandise Marks Act, the Federal High Court procedural rules. That's because in Nigeria, the Federal High Court has exclusive jurisdiction over intellectual property matters. I mean, at this point, we'd have to know that there are, of course, different types of intellectual property. So these laws speak to each of them, specifically. Getting rights to it, the types, we have the copyrights, patents, trademarks, industrial designs. I mean, I know that would have an idea of what all of them are, but of course, would repeat them and go through them for more understanding. Copyright is a legal term that refers to the rights that authors and artists have over their literary and artistic works. I had earlier given an example of an author who has a book. I mean, a work must be a literary work, a musical work, artistic work to be eligible for copyright protection. It's important to know that the work must be original, just a result of the creator's invention, something that was invented by the creator that falls under an artistic or literary work. And when we want to bring it down specifically to FinTech, to make it relatable, we can look at how computer programs can be protected as literary works according to Article 10 of the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. And Section 51 of the Copyright Act says that computer programs, regardless of literary quality, qualify as literary works. For the purposes of deciding who owns the rights to a copy, when that arises, Section 10 of the Copyright Act states that ownership of literary works initially belongs to the author. That's the person from who it originates from, who transfers all, or who can transfer all, some of those rights of his works. A patent is an exclusive right granted for an invention. I mean, as the definition might immediately suggest, it is something original, something new, something that's never been seen before, a process or a product that is a new way, a new process of doing something, offers a technical solution to a problem. I mean, there's been interesting examples of patents in the world. I remember looking up some examples, and I know of drones, I know of golf glasses, and just inventions that give people an exclusive right. So this patent covers that. I mean, the primary benefits of patenting and innovation is that it helps in establishing a market monopoly over that invention. It is only, proper that when people invent something, they have an exclusive right to make profit, to drive revenue, establish a brand from it, gain trust because of that invention, and build an audience from it. So only inventions can be patented. So in Nigeria, to be patentable, an invention must be a new product, as I said earlier, a process that is the result of an inventive activity and is capable of industrial application. A patent is typically valid for a period of 20 years. I mean, I remember listening to one of our mentors who spoke about patents and fintechs. How he said that applications may not necessarily be patented in Nigeria, but the utility of the patent, I hope I'm getting it correctly, but I was able to understand that maybe processes inside the application could be patented. So that can speak specifically to fintechs. we're looking at trademarks. This is really very popular because, I mean, looking at the very descriptions under, you would see, I realize that I'm moving a little bit, so I'm using two devices, please, I'm sorry. The trademarks include devices, brands, headings, labels, tickets, names, signature word, but I think the whole idea is that it indicates uniqueness, indicates, I mean, a brand identity. We can look at some of the logos down there. These things represent these companies. They represent what they stand for. I mean, so this is what defines them. So these unique signs and labels are called trademarks. So just any of these numerals or combinations of what they are, which a company uses in relation to their goods used to sell the services, can and serve as trademarks. And we can see a number of fintechs being represented under these examples. Getting right to industrial designs. A combination of lines, colors, or both, or any three-dimensional form, even though they are not associated with colors, that is intended by the creator to be multiplied by industrial process. And it's not only intended solely to obtain a technical result. I mean, the way I understand it is that, you know, a design in itself, even if it's just a combination of lines and colors, can be a valuable asset. It can be a special feature. And maybe because of how it's designed, can serve to produce a technical result. That in itself is an intellectual property and should be protected because it helps to promote the distinctiveness of the brand, the product, and the service. Trade secrets is defined by the Black's Law Dictionary, secret formula or process, not patented, but known only to certain individuals, using it in compounding some article or trade, having a commercial value. I mean, the value of a trade secret is confidentiality. It may not be exactly specific what the trade secret can be, but we can have maybe information about processes of the company, information about the business, actual business, and when this information is being passed through, most times an NDA serves to protect this information among clients, contractors, investors, employees within the company to protect the trade secrets. So I want to know that, I mean, fintechs, when they go about their businesses and the business model or their processes, they have these trade secrets and secret formula that is confidential and also serve as intellectual property. They fall under the trade secret. But generally, what is the role of intellectual property in fintech? I mean, I know that we've talked about it, of course, when we give examples, but looking at it more deeply, it helps in the success of fintech companies, just about any company, but fintech in this context, because the application of technology to financial services relies heavily on innovation and new ideas. I mean, that these companies can be able to protect the intellectual property in however form it arises, gives them an advantage, helps them to compete, helps them to stand out as a unique identity or whatever unique service they are selling. I mean, for patents, I mean, if you have a special process, if you innovated in a way, fintech companies can protect their innovative technology or technological process, giving them exclusive rights and preventing competitors from copying that. And when it comes to trademarks, we know of logos that when you see them, you associate them with a certain company, and in those logos and signs, you even have a certain trust. Being able to protect them gives them that right, so that, I mean, not everybody can just use them. So it helps to give them that advantage. Even in copyrights, we've seen as in computer programs falling under, being protected under copyrights and trade secrets of fintech companies. So generally, there's a competitive advantage and a general uniqueness concerning that intellectual property protection gives the fintechs in this regard. So it remains very important to fintech companies and encourages innovation, enhances investor business market value, helps, of course, a fintech to creator to stand out among its competitors, drives revenue growth, innovation, encourages all of that. And for the purposes of mentioning at least one case that we see concerning intellectual property, was very concerned. I was more interested in the MasterCard and Visa because they're very popular technology companies, fintechs. And then in 2018, MasterCard filed lawsuit against Visa, alleging that Visa had infringed on its patents related to fraud prevention technology, maybe a certain process that was used to prevent or track fraudulent activities. The case was settled out of court, with Visa agreeing to pay MasterCard an undisclosed amount. So of course, these cases tell us that, I mean, when these rights are infringed, there's always a remedy for fintechs to gain. I mean, you can always approach the courts because these rights are recognized under the law. So intellectual property, in conclusion, the protection is critical for fintech companies to protect their innovations, establish brand recognition, and maintain the competitive advantage. We've stressed that. So it really plays a pivotal role in fintech companies as it protects the company, makes the business more innovative and more competitive, and strengthens its market value. I think on this note, we'll be concluding for Group 1. Thank you for your audience.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for that wonderful presentation on behalf of your group. I'll call on the next presenter quickly. You have 10 minutes to present for Group 2.
Okay, I'm trying to stop sharing. How does that work? Okay, stop share. Send. Thank you.
Group 2
Hello,
presenter,
everyone.
please.
Can you hear me?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Itoro Michael. I'll be presenting for Group 2. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Oh. Good. Okay, can you see my screen, please?
We can see your screen.
All right. I'll just go ahead. I'll be presenting on the role of intellectual property in fintech.
But your screen is not showing your presentation, please.
Okay, can you see it now?
can see your desktop, but not your presentation.
Wow.
Yes, we can see your
It's showing that
presentation now.
Yeah, the screen is out.
Okay. All right. So good evening, everyone. I'll be presenting on the role of intellectual property in FinTech. So basically, FinTech refers to rights that pertain to literary, scientific, musical, and artistic works. And we're all aware that FinTech has evolved from transaction payments to lending to insurance, virtual currencies, blockchains, and like. And this has necessitated for various IP rights associated with FinTech. And it's important that these FinTech companies adopt appropriate IP strategies to protect their core innovations. This doesn't just protect their innovation, helps boost their image and the value of the company, which will in turn attract investors. So that being said, I'll just go straight to um, some important forms of intellectual property in fintech. The first being patent, then we have copyright, trade secrets, trademarks, and industrial designs. So I'll start off with patents. So patents refer to the exclusive monopoly granted by a country to an inventor for his or her invention or ingenuity for a period of time. And with patents, it's for 20 years. This enables the company to exploit this patented invention exclusively within the time given before releasing it to the public domain. That is, for that period of time, they use this invention, precluding all others, all that person from exploiting the invention without the inventor's consent or authorization. And in relation to fintech, patent can be used to protect devices such as ATMs, POS, and the programs that may drive these innovations. So basically, the benefits of having your innovations patented, one of them is it creates market monopoly over the invention, thereby providing the company the avenue to build this brand. So a situation where a company is able to use his or use the invention of that company for a period of time, excluding all other persons, it gives them um it gives them a brand that is different from others. So within that time frame, they're able to build their customer base, and this will simultaneously increase the income and profit margin of the company. So it's very important, and it could be a business strategy as well. So how do you obtain patent? This can be done by making an application to the registrar of the patent registry, together with the prescribed fees being paid. And if the registrar is satisfied that this innovation meets up with statutory requirements, then its patent will be granted. So that just lets you know that it's not everything that can be patented. So the second one is copyright. Copyright, in relation to fintech, computer programs and softwares can be protected under the copyright laws. And copyright assets of fintech companies could include software such as computer codes, audio and visual guides, application programming interface and structures. So copyrights subsists once they are created. They do not have to be registered, they subsist automatically. However, owners of such copyright could still lodge their copyrights with the Nigerian Copyright Commission under its notification and depository scheme. This is important because where situations of competing interest, which may come up later in court if there's an issue like that, this will serve as a proof of ownership. Yeah, and in relation to fintech companies registering their copyright, they could also take a further step to inculcate the practice of placing digital locks on the copies of their work to provide additional security. So if they can do that, then they may not even have an issue of conflicting interest or competing interest in court. So I'll move on to trade secrets. So when we talk about trade secrets, I don't know if we're familiar with SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay, I'll just give an example because I feel it's relatable. How Plankton always tries to steal the Krusty Krab recipe because of its economic and commercial value, because he knows that if he gets a hold of the recipe, he'll be able to have a business that's thriving more than that of the Krusty Krab. So that's basically what trade secrets are. They are confidential business information that have economic or commercial value. So if it's a secret within the organization or within the company, but it doesn't have commercial or economic value, we cannot refer to it as a trade secret. So in relation to fintech, they are you could say algorithms, business methods, ideas, client details, also an important trade secrets, code and secret recipes, like I mentioned with SpongeBob SquarePants. So basically, they give an economic advantage over competitors. Companies can protect their trade secrets by entering into a non-disclosure agreement, not just a memorandum of understanding. This is because a non-disclosure agreement is legally binding on the parties, yes, as opposed to just having an MOU, which is not, because an MOU just simply states the rights and obligations of the parties, but a non-disclosure agreement is binding on the parties. And this will preclude them from giving out information during the course of their interaction and even afterwards. So trademarks. This refers to logos, domain names, icons, and this should be registered. So trademarks eventually okay, for fintech, it's important to protect the trademark for the main financial services, as well as other technological goods or services provided, such as software applications. It's also an asset of business and assists with due diligence during investment rounds. Moving on to industrial designs. Industrial designs basically refers to how
Michael,
this
please,
product.
you can round up. You have 2 more minutes, please.
Okay, so industrial design is a physical and aesthetic outlook of the product, which is offered by the company, could refer to their electronic cards, their computer or machine interfaces. They are also protectable intellectual property asset of the company. And yes, so that's basically, for example, Flutterwave has a design team and creates beautiful product experiences, writing and photography. So that's their industrial design. So I'll just conclude by saying that the role of intellectual property in fintech is very important. It's not enough to have a business, but it's important that you protect the core invention of that business to stay unique and to be able to grow and evolve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Itoro Michael, for that awesome presentation on behalf of your group 2. I'll leave the more comments for the group presentation to our mentors. Quickly, before we move into the question and answer session and also comments from our mentors, I'll urge everyone to put on their camera and smile for the camera. We'll be taking some screenshots of our meeting today, of our mentors and our mentees, and we have to post on our social media platform. For the mentees, I think we know the drill, so please just join me in smiling at the camera and looking at the camera. Thank you. Thank you very much. I can see our beautiful faces and handsome faces. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I think I got some screenshots. We can move on to the question and answer session now. So for our mentors, please, you'll be taking the question and also some few comments from some comments. You also be giving some comments to the presentation made by mentees. I think for some of our mentees, we want to know where we didn't touch or where we make mistakes in our presentation, so we'll do better presenting next time. So the first question and also comment will be coming from Mr. Barino. I think I posted the questions on the chat box, so I'll just go with the first one. What are some important clauses that might be overlooked in an intellectual property agreement concerning a software? Yeah.
Can you come again, please?
Okay. What are some intellectual property clauses that might be overlooked in an IP agreement concerning a software?
Okay, some of the very important agreement that might be overlooked.
Yeah, that was the question.
Is it on the part of the inventor? Okay,
yes,
I think, one thing I've actually observed among inventors is that most of them don't take the question of law very important, particularly as it has to do with intellectual property. Some inventors are so all about wanting to raise funds for their startups that they ignore a whole lot of signal. Like, for instance, the issue of trade secret has actually brought about a whole lot of disagreement right from the beginning. Also, we've had the issue of patent. I think that has actually resulted to a historical issue even up till now, because I think about electricity also. Yeah, it's about electricity. There has been a debate as to who actually invented electricity, even if I think Newton actually took credit for that and secured the patent for that, I think. But it's actually some other person is alleged to have actually invented it, but was too open to Newton, and Newton took advantage of that. So one of the clauses that inventors usually take for granted is a patent. They are just carefree and all of that. Secondly, inventors or innovators would actually take for granted what is known as trade secret, because they want funds. They might just be throwing around their business plan everywhere. Everyone have access to it and all of that. So it's non-disclosure is a very important agreement that some innovators actually overlook. Then when it comes to the computer and all of that, like I rightly stated from the beginning, computer software can actually be protected under copyright, and I believe many innovators are not aware of that. So these are little areas that they might overlook in their agreement with third parties, if they are not properly educated on it.
Thank you very much, sir. I think Mr. Samuel can also contribute to that answer.
Okay, so important clauses that might be overlooked concerning the software. So I think one thing that comes to mind is, let's say, a software as a service agreement, for example, where you have someone build a software for you, and then you now have instances of them requiring or requesting for specific variations to the software to be built, right? So I mean, you want to this comes in two sides now. If you're the software developer, right, you want to make sure that you're protecting your own development on those variations too, because you're like, fine, you have variations, no matter. I will improve on those variations. But however, once I improve on them, because I'm the one doing the improvement on them, I'll consider them an upgrade on what I'm doing, right? There's one angle to that. And then if you are the other side and you are saying that, you know what, because I'm the one paying you to develop the software for me, and I'm the one, requiring your services and telling you specifications, at the end of this contract, those specifications that you've done to the software and the other things should belong to me, right? But truthfully, we both know that in this instance, when it comes to software development, right, it's just a matter of how you can balance it, because you could also want to rely on the old, what's it called now, development for hire stance that are saying that, what, I commission you to do the work, and then that means it belongs to me. But that is my client. I'm like, no, we're doing the work, it belongs to us, right? So it depends on how both parties can go about it. Perhaps the other one I would say is with respect to founders agreement. So when you say intellectual property agreement, it's quite big, right? But when you say founders agreement, for example, where startups, 2 or 3 founders come together to build a company, you want to also ensure, right, that the intellectual property in the product belongs to the company, because the company is a separate entity. You know, the situation whereby 3 people come together to form a company, and then you now hear that Mr. A as JIIPCC, and you went to register the trademark, or you went to register the IP, Mr. A's name. By the time investors come, they will ask you, who owns the product? Is it Mr. A or is it the company? Right? So you want to make sure that is also covered in your agreement, your founders agreement. What else? For NDAs, basically the same thing. So important clauses that, yes, I think those are the ones, right? And perhaps the last one would be a reversionary clause. So if you have an agreement with respect to the software, you license the use of that software for a period of time. You also want to make sure that you restrict that timeline, right? And then restrict the jurisdiction, right? So you want to make sure that, okay, just because we're having these agreements now, I don't want you to expand this scope into Ghana. Fine, if it's going to be Nigeria and Ghana, that's all right. Not beyond those places. And you define that in your agreement as jurisdiction, and you put it under a schedule, Nigeria, Ghana, right? So yeah, I think those are some ways you can actually protect and look at the agreements. I think you're muted. I don't know if
Sorry.
it's...
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was muted. Sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much for that answer. I said I'll be asking you the next question, Mr. Samuel, and I've already read the question. I didn't know I was muted. So what are the potential risks associated with infringing on someone else's intellectual property in the fintech space?
Oh, am I answering the second one or the third one?
The third question.
The third question. Oh, has the second one question be answered?
On the chat.
No. All right, cool. Okay. Okay, but I'm answering the third question. Potential risk associated with involving someone else's. I mean, so one of the most important things you want to do for your fintech brand is protect the brand at every point in time, right? So the first thing is the credibility. People say it's the money, no, it's the credibility. The way the ecosystem works, if anything happens in the fintech now, right? Investors that have their eyes. So the way it is, investors have their eyes on African startups at every point in time. They know what's going on, right? If there's anything that is wrong with your startup, there are any conversations about it. And this goes beyond what's it called now? Just infringing. The most slightest issues with respect to how you treat your staffs and harassment issues, mismanagement of funds on your board, corporate governance, etc. Right? They know all these things. And so, I mean, like I said, the first thing first is credibility. Secondly, if you have a startup and you go and infringe on someone else's trademark or anything, they'll come after you. In fact, what you see in Nigeria is people develop something. Someone in the entertainment space, perhaps a comedian or a content creator or something. Ideally, you expect the person to just trademark their name or their book or anything with respect to the services they're offering, right? Creative writing, which falls under entertainment. But in us, what they do is they will go and patent it under most times beverage and tech. A typical example is what you have with Sabino's. He trademarked his words. What was that word he says again? There's something he used. He trademarked it on that tech, right? And then he went after Friesland.
Something huge. He's expecting something huge.
Good. Thank you very much. He trademarked something huge on that tech. And then he went after Friesland. Friesland operates on that food. I said, oh, they use this, and all of those things, right? So, I mean, people that don't understand how the trademark classification works, if everybody was just going Friesland infringed, Friesland infringed, so before you now cop that narrative, right, you want to make sure that everything is clear. So if in this instance you do not have anything at all, so very important for you to check, right, and make sure that the category you're picking a name from. So ideally, before you do a trademark anyway, there's always a search. They do a manual search for it to ensure that that mark has not been infringed. So credibility, what's it called? Court suits, that one is there. And if at all you tend to fall into any of those traps and you infringe, right? Instead of going to court, you can settle out of court, you can do arbitration and all of those things. And lastly, too, is that it could also, it still falls back to credibility, because there are instances where you have guys that want to work with you, companies that want to work with you, for example, and they see how you do with IP. So imagine a company that had an agreement with someone, and the entire transaction has ended. Ideally, I meant to stop using the other party's IP, but you still go ahead to use the other party's IP. Like I said, the ecosystem is not so huge that people do not know you. So if someone else, people will be wary to partner with you because they know that this company is going to infringe on our IP. If we're in the agreement today now, in 2 months' time, we hear that they're still using that product and saying that, oh, they're in partnership with so and so and so, right? So, it's very, very important. The greatest concern is not with money, right? Money is very important. And when I say the greatest concern is not money, doesn't mean that they can't bill you and they will sue you for a lot. Oh God, they will sue you for a lot because you're a tech company, they believe you have money, and the investors at the other side are going to rip you apart, right? But most important thing is the credibility. The cost is to be in Nigeria, but by the time you step out for a conference in Brazil, in France, Belgium, they'll hear your gist, and that's not one output that you want, right? So yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question will be for Mr. Barino. Okay, are there any regulations or laws specific to FinTech that governs intellectual property?
Thank you very much. When it comes to FinTech in Nigeria, as of today, there is no specific law particularly addressing FinTechs in Nigeria. Though generally, FinTechs as service providers would actually come under the CBN Act. They are regulated by the CBN because they provide financial services, which is basically regulated by the central bank, and also would also be made to come under other regulation like the Bank and Other Financial Institution Act, and as well as the Anti-Money Laundering Act and what have you. So generally, there is no specific regulation that governs FinTech, talk more of addressing intellectual property specifically as they affect FinTech.
All right, thank you very much, sir. The next question: are there any recent developments or trends in FinTech that intellectual property in FinTech and intellectual property that companies should be aware of? The question is also for you, Mr. Wei.
Of course, when it comes to Nigeria, I don't think there has been any specific development. But when it comes to the World Intellectual Property Organization, particularly as it has to do with the NICE class of for intellectual property, Nigeria actually adopts, for trademarks. When it has to do with the NICE category, Nigeria is actually party to the NICE agreement and all of that. So the NICE classes rather, are updated from time to time. This is specific for those that are into crypto and all of that. You have to be aware that you can now register your crypto products or services as trademarks, as they have been incorporated within the NICE category by the latest updates that came into force on the 1st of January 2023.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
I totally agree with you, sir. I'm sorry for cutting you. I totally agree with you, Mr. Barina. But that question, that raises the question now that what will Nigeria do now that the CBN has a very interesting view with respect to crypto, but the SEC is a bit still friendly, right? I mean, okay, I'm just throwing as an open conversation.
Yes. Okay. The thing there is these institutions are independent institutions, so it's expected that they act independently. The action of the CBN doesn't bind. It's not law. As of today, of course, there's a high court ruling on that, a high court judgment on that, that the circular doesn't actually amount to a law, and it's not binding on any other institution. I think what's actually happening in Nigeria is issue of, let me say, peer pressure. Once an institution takes action against a group of persons, then you see other institution wants to follow suit. But there has been a situation where the Corporate Affairs Commission wanted to, rejected a name that wanted to be registered as a cryptocurrency company simply because one of its objects was crypto, and then operates the company. Because the CBN, as far as Nigeria adopts the NICE agreement, is part of the NICE. Is party to the NICE agreement, and then that it has been updated. And of course, we can see it's actually bigger to register a crypto product or service as because Nigeria actually has a category of trademarks, class of trademarks. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. So I mean,
thank you very much,
it's a good step in the right direction. It's the first step in the right direction. Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we'll be taking the last question because of time and going to the end of the program. The question is for Mr. Samuel. How do intellectual property considerations impact merger and acquisition in the FinTech industry? I think you mentioned something about that during your presentation area.
Yes, thank you. It was with respect to investors coming in, right? Yeah, so it's very, very key because I'll give you two scenarios. We had a situation whereby a client wanted to enter into an agreement with MTN. And one of the first things MTN requested for was that before we use this product, so before we use this service, we need to be sure that you are the owner of the service, right? So we had to make sure that we registered the source code with the NCC and then got that certificate before we sent it to them. And that was just a one-off transactions. So what you see is that when investors come on board, because M&As, when people think of M&As, people think of large acquisition, I know what to. Someone is buying $1 billion, it doesn't necessarily have to be so, right? You have the acquisition angle, you have the mergers angle, 51%, below 51%, right? So when those things happen, you want to make sure, or one of the things that investors look at is the target company, right, that we're going to acquire. Do they have their books? So most times your due diligence, you want to make sure that the target company is registered, the employment contracts are very good. There is no bad liver. If there's a bad liver, that is someone that has left the company on a bad state. Is there anything that needs to be done with respect to that? You also want to ensure that that company has not licensed any of its IP to another person, right? So you now look at the IP part. You're looking at, okay, the products they built so far, who does it belong to? At the point of us coming in, who have they licensed the product to, right? How much money or what's the value of that product? I know all this just tells goes back to one question as to whether or not that product has actually been registered, right? Because you also want to ensure that whatever it is that you are taking or whatever it is that you are working with is an intangible asset that to an extent is tangible. So yes, investors take this very seriously in the space. If you are, like I said, if you're coming, you want to be sure that, okay, you know what, if we are going to use Payday, for example, someone wants to use Payday, they want to ensure that Payday, the trademark is secure. They've done everything they need to do with respect to the copyright of their source codes. If any of the founders or any of the early founders still have access to the company's IP and whether or not it should be relinquished. So these are all the questions you want to ask, because as an investor, you don't want to buy an empty barrel, right? And you also want to check your books to be sure that everything has been covered. Everything. So this now you now look at when they registered their trademark. Is it up to 7 years? Is 7 years time to renew as it lapsed? You look at their patent. Is it past 20 years? Is it still under 20 years? You know, these are all the things that I look at, because, like I said, as an investor, you don't know what's up with the company. If you see the valuation, that's fine, but also the value of the tech company you are taking is as much as the value of its IP assets and its business model put together. So you don't want to just take 50% when the other 50% relies on that, right? So these things really affect how investors look at it. Apart from so many other things on the company regulation angle and all of those things, when it comes to IP, investors are very, very, very keen. All your documents said, if there's anything that needs to be done, returns to check it. So yes, it's very important. It's very, very important.
All right, thank you very much, sir. I think with this, we've come to the end of the program for today. The time is up already. I can see some of the mentees have left the group. Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel, for sharing the slides on the chat box. We've seen it. All the mentees are available. You can just click on the slide and download this on your phone. Thank you very much. I think
you're welcome.
Mr.
You're welcome, everyone.
Mr. Joseph Obo is still on the call, so we'll call on him to just give us a closing notes before we end the program.
Thank you so very much. I want to appreciate my colleagues, Mr. Samuel, Mr. Baribo, and Mr. George. For me, it's been quite enlightening. I've picked up a whole lot. One of the most important information for me, beyond all the IP and FinTech information, had to do with the fact that, the regulations of one regulator necessarily doesn't bind the activities or the actions of any other regulator in that space. So that's something that we really have to, as mentees, take into consideration, so that when CBN is dishing out a lot of things, and you are thinking that, okay, that would apply to SEC, it will apply to NIDA and all of that, it necessarily might not be so in all cases. So I want to say a very big thank you to all of our mentors. Today has really been very interesting, very educative, very in-depth. I would advise mentees to go through this video on YouTube, try and listen to it again. You'll be shocked what you missed out, along the way and all that. And also for our groups, for the mentees, thank you for putting your heads together, researching on the subject matter area, and also bringing very quality delivery in terms of your presentations. Today has really been very good. I want to thank Mr. Hussein as well, for putting, everything in proper place. The entire back end of today's session has been taken care of by him. Thank you, Mr. Hussein. Thank you to JIIPCC for putting this together. We hope that we can actually do much more with the mentors, of course, the mentees as well, in future cohorts. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys and everyone for making today a huge success.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh,
Brian.
and maybe I should just mention that I was privileged enough to be part of the mentees.
No.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, today
I think sometime last year or thereabout, yeah, and I learned a lot as well.
Wow, thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, cheers.
Bye-bye.